Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here today. What I'd like to be able to do is introduce our exceptional partners that are joining us today as we have moved forward with the homicide investigation involving Ingeborg Morely. We have with us today Irondequoit Town Supervisor David Seeley, Monroe County District Attorney Sandra Dorley, Monica O'Brien from the Monroe County District Attorney's Office and our lead prosecutor in this case, Sergeant Jessica Franco from the Irondequoit Police Department and her investigative team, including Investigator Andrew Wigton, Investigator Bradley Late, Investigator Christopher Soprano. From the Irondequoit Police Department Technical Services team that did all the forensic work associated with this investigation, or I should say much of the forensic work, Sergeant Nick Shemang, Officer Christopher Gruen, and Officer Brandon Saley. Our exceptional partners in this investigation from the New York State Police is Senior Investigator Douglas Thomas and his investigative team that works so closely with our unit. From the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, we have Under Sheriff Corey Brown, Lieutenant Alberti, and Deputy Brian McCoy, who assisted us with the forensics at the scene. From the Monroe County Lab, we have Jody Haig, who's a biologist at that location. And assisting us with the task force work associated with this was U.S. Marshal of Western New York, Charles Salina, and his investigative team as we track down a number of leads. Finally, we have Commissioner Robert Kiley and his team from the Department of Public Works who assisted us as we continued our ground search associated with this investigation and helped us with resolving this matter. We're here today to announce the arrest and arraignment of Frederick Bohn on the charge of murder in the second degree involving the death of Ingeborg Morely. The investigation involved a great deal of work on the part of the Irondequoit Police Department and our public safety partners. The teamwork displayed by our investigative teams was exceptional. During this investigation, new leads were developed and everyone was pursued. The culmination of this combination resulted in the arrest of Mr. Bohn. Mrs. Morely was a well-respected individual who was very active in her community. She developed positive relationships with her neighbors and with her activities group. She was very involved with the YMCA Lifespan group, and we heard firsthand from her friends and the program director about what a gracious and caring person she was. Sergeant Franco and I had the opportunity to meet with these group members and heard firsthand about how she was a valued member of that group. Shortly after this tragic death occurred, a former neighbor sent an email to me describing Mrs. Morely. Inge was my next door neighbor for 10 years, and we kept in touch even after I moved. She gave my daughter her very first stuffed animal, which she still plays with today. Both Ken, Mr. Morely, and Inge were wonderful people. 10 years is a long time, and I was so fond of both of them. It is heartbreaking for me to think of Inge's life ending in such a way. And that's from Sergeant Beth Laird of the Rochester Police Department, who was here today for the arraignment and was very supportive of all the investigative efforts that were done. As we pointed out early in this investigation, we felt strongly that this was not a random act. The investigative leads indicated that the perpetrator was familiar and connected to Mrs. Morely. I believe that the residents of Irondequoit and our greater community will join me in praising the exceptional work done by the Irondequoit Police Department and our investigative partners. They spent countless hours during the past weeks putting together a case that ultimately led to the arrest of this perpetrator. At this point, what I'd like to do is call upon Monroe County District Attorney Sandra Dorley for some comments.
Sure. Thank you, Chief. And good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here. And before I begin, I just want you to look around and look at all of these law enforcement partners. They are the heart and soul of what we have here in Monroe County. And if it wasn't for their hard work, their diligent work, their relentless work, we would not be here today to alert the county of this murder arrest. So Mr. Bohn was arraigned this morning on one count of murder in the second degree. Obviously, it's a Class A felony. It will be presented to a Monroe County grand jury in the next few days. The preliminary hearing date is scheduled for next Wednesday, which would be the 17th at 10:30 in the morning, but we anticipate that there will be grand jury action before that day. The lead prosecutor on this case has worked with all of these partners from the beginning. It's Monica O'Brien, who's the head of our Elder Abuse Bureau, and I want to commend Monica for all of the hard work that she's put in the last week or so, just making sure that all of our T's were crossed and our I's were dotted for this investigation, and we look forward to a successful prosecution once Mr. Bohn is arraigned and the matter proceeds to trial. He's held no bail, no release, but Mr. Bohn is also charged with two other matters upon which he is held in the Monroe County jail. He's held on a criminal possession of stolen property in the 5th degree, which is a misdemeanor, but it's related to this investigation. And while in the jail, he was also arrested for a grand larceny in the 4th degree for stealing a debit or credit card from a nurse within the facility. So in addition to the murder charge, he has those two pending as well. And again, I don't want to comment much on the facts, but again, if you look at the partners who were up here before you, it's the culmination of hard work on the part of all of these partners putting this case together. And, you know, our heart goes out to Miss Morley's her friends, her family. This really was a horrendous death to a person so undeserving, a person who was so kind to her neighbors and to the community, and at one point to the defendant. So thank you much. Does anyone have any questions about the legal process?
Well, I'm trying to learn more about how she actually died. Some details, if there was a weapon involved, that sort of thing.
You know, at this point, we're going to stick to what is contained in the four corners of the felony complaint. We typically do not comment on the facts of the case before it's put forth in trial, and we are preparing for a grand jury, so I don't want to comment further on that.
Have you gotten an exact cause of death from the ME?
Yes, we have, and that has led us all to the position that we are here, that we're standing here, we believe, and we're confident that it was a homicide.
Is there anything you can tell us about, I mean, this relative doing this to his aunt? I mean, about their relationship or what his goal was? Was he trying to get money?
Motive, again, will be something that comes out during the course of the trial. If it does, again, motive is not something that we need to prove in a murder case, but if you think about a relationship that she had with this individual, there was obviously some trust here, and it was the ultimate betrayal of trust leading to her death. Very sad. Anyone else? Thank you so much.
Any,
Could you talk a little bit about there's so many partners here. Can we at least connect the dots as far as who did what for this investigation? Was the suspect running, and that's why some of your folks, I mean, and we've got DPW here, were they searching for evidence? Can you kind of...
Right. Yep, absolutely. So if we look around the room, the State Police Investigative Team worked in conjunction with our investigators. We were able to then use that as a force multiplier and be able to track down every possible lead and any potential individual that needed to be interviewed, re-interviewed, looking to determine what surveillance, video footage might be available. Really, as we have done traditionally throughout my time here at the Irondequoit Police Department, left no stone unturned. In association with that, any evidence that was collected by the exceptional forensic team members, both from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office and the Irondequoit Police Department, that was properly cataloged and subsequently transported to the Monroe County lab, where the forensics analysis was done associated with that, which will subsequently be entered into evidence as we move forward with a criminal prosecution. The DPW, as we have used in the past, has been exceptional to work with, and on occasion when we have particular ground search to conduct, or what we did several months ago with an accident reconstruction, provide us with the particular equipment that we would need, as well as additional personnel to be able to conduct that ground search in the event that we were looking for something that might have been discarded or maybe dropped along the way when this person was coming to or leaving a location. Who did I miss? Did I get everybody? Oh, the Marshal Service, thank you. I apologize for that. U.S. Marshal, there goes my security clearance. The Marshal Service assisted us as we were tracking down potential witnesses or persons of interest to be able to interview them. Again, they're a force multiplier for us. They have an excellent group of team members that you see here today. When we are attempting to locate an individual, that gives us the ability to cross all types of jurisdictional boundaries, and that is a great assistance to us in locating people that we need to interview and move forward with in this investigation.
Where
So,
did you find the suspect? Was he here still? Or did he have to be tracked down somewhere else?
he did have to be located, yes.
Was he out of state?
He was not.
Was this a case of you had an idea who it was and then you just had to get the evidence to charge him?
Well, in the beginning, and I mentioned that at an earlier media event, we felt as though that this was not a random act, that somebody may very well have been familiar with Mrs. Morely as a result of the fact that there was no forced entry and that there were no indicators to us that it was, if you will, an unknown stranger in the home. And again, that's very preliminary at the time. We obviously didn't draw that conclusion and only pursue that conclusion, but we worked with every piece of evidence or information that we had. But that was our feeling, and we had said that really the day after the incident was investigated by us, that we did not feel as though it was a random act. We want our residents throughout this entire town, and really this entire community, to know that we're going to do everything we can to determine what took place and move forward with a successful prosecution. So as the district attorney articulated, we've come so far. I don't want to do anything that would compromise the integrity of this investigation. We owe this to Mrs. Morely. We owe this to our community. So that was our feeling, based upon the years of experience that some of us have been involved in law enforcement, but certainly did not draw that conclusion to make it the only conclusion, because that would be very small-minded of us.
But he was on a short list?
He was on the list.
Chief, I think you told us that, correct me if I'm wrong, this investigation started with a welfare check call, is that right?
That is correct.
From a family member. Did that call come from Mr. Bohn?
It did not.
Another family member?
Right.
Can you describe the scene, that what led you to, obviously, I'm assuming what you're explaining means there was no forced entry, but was the house in disarray? Were there things missing from inside? I know he's also been charged with possession of criminal possession of stolen property.
Yes.
So I'm assuming, I think connecting the dots, we're thinking he is alleged to have gone in, maybe committed the act and stolen from her. Are there certain things that were missing, or what was he after?
You want to speak to that charge, because that was out of the jail, right?
And the stolen property fifth, which was him being in possession of some of her property. You know, we do believe that there was a theft involved. We're not going to tell you right now whether or not that was a motivating factor for the murder or whether it was an afterthought, but it was a charge that we originally filed against him because we knew that we could link him to the possession of stolen property, that being some of her property, if that makes sense.
And he's been locked up already since like March 26th is what I'm told, or we understand?
He was arraigned and held on bail for the stolen property in the 5th degree. While he was in custody, then he committed the act of the grand larceny in the 4th degree that I described, from you taking a debit credit card from a nurse within the jail. And then while he was in custody, the partners that you see here continued the investigation, and the charges were lodged last night, and he was arraigned this morning.
Chief, can you talk a little bit about the relationship between these two people, what you've learned about it in the course of your investigation? Had she been helping him in the past? Did he know, had he lived with her? What was their relationship like?
In very simple terms, they did have a relationship. They would frequent, and he would visit her. However, the regularity of that is purely speculation, since we don't have Mrs. Morely to be able to tell us that.
Had the neighbors who wrote to you seen him coming and going or leaving?
Well, the neighbor who wrote to me no longer lives there. She had since moved, and I think we mentioned that in the email, but they'd still remained in contact with each other, but at this particular point, I would be remiss if I mentioned what that relationship was until we move forward with this prosecution.
I'm a little confused. You said he stole a nurse's debit card while he was in jail. So it was a nurse that worked there?
Yes.
And how did that happen?
Again, I'm not going to go into the facts as to how it happened, but it was enough that we felt confident charging him with grand larceny in the 4th degree for the theft of that card.
Okay. Well,
Can I just ask you, how are you pronouncing this suspect's last name? Bone?
Bone.
Bone, all right, I see. And one more thing, I remember that day you were spending a lot of time looking at some cars, two different cars in the garages. Are you, I mean, was some of this was he borrowing the car frequently or using one of the cars?
I would just say that that goes under the category of leaving no stone unturned. So obviously it's there. And once we have secured that particular site or scene, we need to make sure that we exhaust all of our investigative options. And that's exactly what we were doing that day. So, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Some of our partners will be around if you wish to speak to them individually. And thanks very much for your help.